Frontrunner Hillary Clinton took a big step this week toward locking up the Democratic nomination with her sweeping victory in the New York primary. But Bernie Sanders shows no signs of conceding and continues to run hard against her. Joining us now from Florida, the chair of the Democratic National Committee, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Congresswoman, given that Hillary Clinton seems to have a pretty clear path to the nomination now, does Bernie Sanders need to tone down his attacks and start to bring the party together?
Well, I actually have been very proud throughout this campaign of both of our candidates. You've seen in every single one of our debates, and then also in discussions on the campaign trail, the substance and the commitment that each of our candidates has to laying out for the American people their vision for how they'd move our country forward. And so I've been quite proud of both of them, particularly when compared to the circus that has unfolded on the other side.
But if you can answer my question, does Bernie Sanders need to tone down his attacks?
I'm about to.
Okay, I was waiting.
I'm about to. I needed to preface it for a moment because they've done a great job at being substantive comparatively. But what I have cautioned over the last several weeks is that we need to make sure that the rhetoric that each candidate uses is such that it doesn't make it more difficult for us to reunify. And I think that, it's expected in a campaign like this one, as we get towards the narrow end of the funnel, we've only got 19 primaries left, that it's going to get a little more intense, but we need to make sure that we focus on the end game, which is to obviously make sure that we can elect our nominee president of the United States, which I'm confident that we will.
But Sanders continues, even after New York, to go after Clinton. Here's just some of what he said during a town hall this week in Pennsylvania.
One of the differences between Secretary Clinton and myself is I have opposed every one of these disastrous trade agreements. One of the major differences is precisely how we raise money for our campaigns.
Question, is that helpful to electing a Democratic president?
Chris, when you look at what's happened this week on the other side of the aisle with basically Toto pulling back the curtain on the wizard and revealing that Donald Trump isn't on the level, has never been on the level. They basically have a faker running for president of the United States, and has been the most extreme misogynistic, bigoted candidate that the Republican Party certainly has ever put forward, and probably any candidate who's ever run before. Pointed differences between our candidates that at the end of this primary, it pales in comparison to what's played out on the other side of the aisle. I mean, you have each of these candidates on the other side.
I mean, forgive me, and I understand it's your job. I understand it's your job to make the case against the Republicans, but the fact is that Bernie Sanders talks repeatedly about Hillary Clinton not standing up to Wall Street, in fact, taking hundreds of thousands of dollars for speeches whose transcripts she won't release, not standing up to the big oil and gas industry, not standing up to drug companies. Deal with your own party, if you will, for a moment. Is that helpful, those kinds of critiques, to electing a Democratic president?
I'm glad to deal with my own party, but it has to be done in the framework and context.
I got it. You think the other guys are worse, but let's deal with your party.
Much. But if you look at the way our campaign has played out, both of our candidates are focused on achieving the same goal. If either one of them were president, they would continue to build on the 73 straight months of job growth we've had in the private sector. A president like President Obama, who has pulled us out of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, and whether it's Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, they have both talked about helping people be able to reach the middle class by making sure that we continue to have policies and build on those policies, that people can have a good job.
But how about the fact,
reduce income inequality?
But if I may, how about the fact that Bernie Sanders says that Hillary Clinton is, in effect, a corporate sellout? I mean, you make it sound like there hasn't been much more of a critique of Hillary Clinton than there has been.
Again, I think because we have two candidates who have focused on their desire to achieve the same goals and build on the legacy of success that we've had, as opposed to dragging us backwards to the policies of a presidency that plunged us into an economic crisis, that differences of opinion, even sharp ones, are pale in comparison compared to what's played out on the other side. And so we had a much more divisive primary in 2008, Chris, and arguably. And not only did we reunify successfully, we elected Barack Obama. He selected Hillary Clinton to be his Secretary of State. I was a Hillary Clinton supporter to the last day in 2008, if you recall, and he asked me to be his DNC chair. So I'm very confident that regardless of the intensity of what's played out here at the last stages of the campaign, whichever one of our candidates ultimately is our nominee, we are going to be unified, and that is certainly not the case that's playing out on the other side, where they're headed for chaos at their convention.
You talk about unity, but there was a lot of analysis in the media this week that Sanders' attacks have been helping to drive up Clinton's negatives. And I want to put up some numbers. In a Wall Street Journal poll, the rating on whether people have a positive or negative view of Clinton is at -24. Among all men, she's at -40. Among all whites, she's at -39. Now, look, I know, so you don't have to say it, I know that Trump's numbers are even worse, but he may not be the nominee. Her numbers, deal with them, if you will, please, are historically low.
Well, Republicans are certainly, some Republicans are certainly hoping behind hope that Donald Trump is not their nominee, and with good reason. But if you look at the exit polls that were coming out of New York, and our voters were asked whether they were enthusiastic and thought our primary had energized them, 7 out of 10 of those voters asked said yes, they thought this primary energized them about supporting either one of our candidates. Less than 40% said the same about the Republicans.
Wait,
In fact,
can I just pick,
actually, so.
Can I just pick, excuse me for a second.
Sorry?
I just want to pick up on that because you talk about
those are the facts that really matter.
No, well, good. Well, I want to talk about the enthusiasm of Clinton's support, because so far this year, 23.1 million people have voted in Republican primaries. 18.5 million have voted in Democratic primaries. So why shouldn't we believe that, in fact, when it comes to enthusiasm, Republicans have a big advantage? They have almost a $5 million edge and 5 million voter edge in turnout.
Hillary Clinton has had 10.6 million people vote for her at this point. Bernie Sanders, 7.1 million people. Hillary Clinton has more votes than Donald Trump, and
I understand,
Sanders
but there
has
were
more
17
votes
candidates
than Kasich
on
and
one
Cruz,
side.
and so that's exactly the point. Is there were 17 candidates on one side generating a whole bunch of turnout. In many places around the country, we came close or had the equivalent of the turnout. But when you look today, where we are today in this campaign, in terms of the energy and enthusiasm and interest in supporting our eventual nominee, there is far more support and energy on our side than there is on the Republican side. The same was true coming out of Wisconsin. So this is a pattern in different kinds of states. And so, especially because we are continuing to head towards a unified effort when our primary is over, to make sure that we can get behind our eventual nominee. And the Republicans are clearly headed for a brokered convention that is going to descend into chaos. And there's almost no one that you could ask that doesn't acknowledge that.
I want to talk about one last subject with you, Congresswoman. You have dismissed the idea that Hillary Clinton could face any legal troubles over her private email server as, quote, ludicrous. How do you know that?
I'm simply confident that as the investigation continues, that Hillary Clinton has made it clear, and there are scores of individuals who are associated with the federal government that have indicated that it's clear that she conducted herself completely legally, that she was able to use private email just like previous Republican and Democratic secretaries of state. And I think that at the end of the day, this is going to amount to nothing more than an investigation. When they take a close look, I think she's going to be fine.
The reason I ask is the FBI has dozens of agents who have been investigating this issue for months. And just this week, FBI Director James Comey said that this could go on well past, or at least past, the Democratic convention in July. You know, there's got to be something there that they're investigating. Are you saying it's all a waste of time?
I'm not commenting on it one way or the other than to say that it is ludicrous to keep raising. Yes, and I'm going to say it again. It's ludicrous to keep raising the question of whether this plays out to an unfortunate end. Hillary Clinton has released 55,000 pages of emails. It has provided the most transparency of probably any previous presidential candidate in terms of the conversations that she's had as Secretary of State, as a public official. It is completely available for perusal by the press, and she was doing something and using private email in the same way that previous secretaries of state have done.
You know that's not true.
According to the policy that she was allowed
nobody
to.
Says that's true. Nobody.
Other than the privates. Other than the private server.
Well,
right.
Other than the private server is a big deal, and nobody had 30,000 work emails on their private server or private email period. So, I mean, the comparisons to Colin Powell I mean, that's just not true, Congresswoman.
It certainly is true, because Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, John Kerry all used private email to communicate with their staff.
Yeah,
and
maybe a dozen, not 30,000.
I'm not counting, but over the course of her term, she used private email and was allowed to use private email. That's not in dispute, and she's released 55,000 pages of emails. At the end of the day, this is a distraction, because the American people are going to decide who they vote for president based on who they believe is going to continue to move us forward and help everybody who wants to succeed have a fair shot to do so. And what they're not going to vote on is distractions like this one. And they're certainly not going to choose any one of the Republican candidates who think that we should continue and go back to policies that focus on the wealthiest, most fortunate Americans, that are extreme, like Donald Trump suggesting that we're going to deport 11 million people,
or that
we're going to ban an entire religion from coming into the country. That's the choice.
All right. I thank you very much. We'll have you back, and you can continue the conversation. Thanks so much for sharing part of your weekend with us.
Look forward to it.